Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Mighty Mac Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Trapp, Director of Disability Studies at the University of Oregon and author of the new book, Range of Motion, from Acre Books, part of the University of Chicago. I'm so psyched to have him here. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing just fine. You know, I had a chance to take a look at your book, and full disclosure, obviously I'm disabled, and my sister was a counselor at my camp in the summer.
Oh, wow.
So we have a little bit in common. You're also, I think, from Ohio, right?
Yeah. Are you from Ohio?
I am. I was born in Bowling Green.
Oh,
Well, I'm curious to know what brought you to disability studies and all the way to the University of Oregon from Ohio.
yeah. I mean, I think I was always interested in disability studies, even when I was a college student at Ohio University, where I got my undergrad. There was like
Okay.
a book called Handbook of Disability Studies that I found in like 2004. And I was like, what the heck is this? And
Yeah.
that's when I kind of discovered that was a thing, but there wasn't a ton of stuff written back then. And so when I got my master's and PhD at the University of Cincinnati, and I really wanted to write about my sibling experience. I wanted to write a character like my twin brother and put that in literature because I didn't really see a character like my twin brother in literature, and but I didn't want to mess it up, so I needed
Yeah,
to
sure,
read.
sure.
I needed to read deeply into what disabled people have to say about representation and how they've been represented. So at that time, 2009, 10, 11, 12, disability studies really started to coalesce as a discipline. A lot more people were studying it. And so I ended up studying that partly for my PhD. And then I kept writing and wound up at the University of Oregon with my spouse, got a job here too. And so
Oh,
they were
great.
just starting a disability studies program here. And so I locked into teaching my first disability studies class in 2018, and then have been teaching it ever since, and became the director here. So it's been
Oh,
great.
that's great. I was really interested in your book. Can you tell me a little bit about not only just your relationship with your brother, but your inspiration for pulling the story together for Range of Motion?
Yeah, I think, ever since I was little, I've been asked to like narrate my brother. Like, what's it like to have a sibling that has, intellectual disabilities, severe cerebral palsy, communication disabilities? My twin brother could say 12 words, but
Yep.
the ways he said those words, multiplied their meaning, the tone he said it, the facial expression he was making as he said it, not saying it. He could say for no, but then, my name could be, like, I love you, or like, go screw yourself. So depending on how he said
Sure.
it. So, I wanted to kind of map that for a reader and dramatize the kind of language he invented to communicate, and also like what it's like to be in a disability family or special needs family, whatever you want to call it. And so, I started writing about that in a more serious way when I was about 25 or 6, went to the University of Cincinnati. And I actually started writing about the camp experience. That was kind of my inspiration to start writing.
Yep.
Because I was a counselor at Camp Cheerful. That's what it actually was called. And
Really? Oh, that's
yeah, and
great.
I actually came back there to read from the novel. They were really excited to be featured in
Oh, nice.
the
Yeah,
book,
to get a little airtime. Great.
even though there's campers like smoking cigarettes behind the cabin and stuff, and they were super psyched. And anyway, but at age 14, I was not excited to be sent to a place called Camp Cheerful. I was like, what the hell is
Right.
this? But it ended up being this sort of crip camp kind of experience where,
Yep.
disability culture and just, any way you were was accepted. So it really became like a second home for me and my brother. And so I wanted to represent the chaos of that and the joy. And so that's where the
Sure.
novel started. And actually, when I was a counselor, one of my campers, not my brother, escaped from the camp just like Sal does in the novel in his
Yep.
power chair from a pool party, and it was my goddamn fault. And I always wondered, why he did that, and it was sort of a really punk rock kind of thing. So that's kind of how the novel
Sure.
started, was trying to write about that dramatic action, but then also as a kind of backdoor to write about what it's like to be a brother and grow up with my twin brother. And so it's kind of a
Sure.
confabulation of fiction and not in real life. And then the novel kind of blossomed into becoming more about the backstory, the brothers growing up together. And so my mom's actually has a highlighter. She's highlighting all the true things. And
Oh,
there's a
that's
lot of
great. That's
yellow.
great.
There's a lot of yellow, but there's also, a lot of stuff I made up because it's fiction.
Sure. And I think the story is incredible. When you and your brother went to the camp, was it the first time he had experienced being around other disabled people?
I mean, he went to school,
Yeah.
a special needs school for people with disabilities, and so he'd been, in that setting, and he'd gone to camps a little bit, but it was one of the first times where he like slept overnight there for an entire week
Yeah.
with not our mother, and
Yeah,
so
sure.
and like
And how about you? Was it your first experience with other types of disabilities?
I mean, I'd always gone to my brother's, visited his classrooms and stuff, but like it was definitely like an education of like all the varying kinds of lives you can lead with a disability. Some people had,
Yeah.
corporate jobs that are just like, I can't go on vacation to the
Sure.
beach very easily. So I'm coming to camp and they love camp. They've
Yeah,
been going
right.
since they're little. And people who had, get paid, and
Yeah,
then there's people
right.
that are from like, very supportive group homes or, not very good group homes or even institutions.
Yeah,
You're deaf people with autism, just all kinds of people living their lives. So it was I knew what to do with my brother. Like I was the total care
yeah,
expert because I could change a diaper like nobody's business. And
sure.
I could get poop on my arm and not, care. And
Freak out.
but dealing with people that needed other supports was you know a challenge, but also things I learned how to communicate with those people and engage those people.
That's great. And did you and your brother have a shorthand for communicating in a group environment like that?
Oh, for sure. Like he's kind of my wingman for flirting with
Yeah.
girls, and I kind of had to set him up, and he would
Nice.
Danny beats me up, he would say, like, so we had that kinda, or he would, like, mock like, who's older, whose mom loved more, we had that kinda, like, twin
That's
shtick, we
great.
definitely had a twin shtick going on,
Nice.
and he was a flirt with women so much, so it was, like, very, I was, like, the good brother helping him out, and it was a great
That's
role
great.
to play.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about his disability? Because I know when I was growing up in the 70s, I had a lot of friends that had CP. I had some friends that were intellectually limited to some extent. A lot of them had the boards where they could point out the alphabet or words to communicate. Was your brother on that level, or what level was he intellectually?
I mean, I think if you the psychological exams he would take were very depressing because they would be like, he's
Yeah.
between 6 months and 6 years. I think it's
Yeah.
like, wow, okay. I even have that, a kind of riff in the novel, or the brother's like, he's not fucking 6 years old, and like,
Yeah, right.
and so I mean, so I think he definitely was intellectually disabled, but like, there's such a wide spectrum, and like, well, what are you asking him to do? What are you asking him to understand? One of the pleasures about my brother is he would start laughing at stuff he wasn't supposed to get or know. Like every time in the Monica Lewinsky scandal, every time they
Yeah.
said Monica Lewinsky, he's cracking up. We're like, who told him, what a blowjob was? Like nobody, but
Yeah,
like,
right, right.
so like, how old is that? I don't know. And but he was legally blind, and so that kind of limited the board use. He
Yeah.
had a whisper woof, just like in the novel where it whispers into his ear,
Yeah.
and then he would click it with his head. He was also very limited in movement,
Yeah.
but he could say yes and no, and click a switch with his header. And then actually, like the computer he didn't really enjoy using it as much. Like it wasn't as useful to
Yeah.
him as conversating with somebody and you asking him questions. And he just liked interacting with people. He was such a people person. But he had a manual wheelchair. So that was the big difference between
Yeah.
Sal and my brother, was the character in the novel, and my character, the person who actually escaped from camp, who really reminded me of my brother, but could run me over with his wheelchair. I thought that was
Yeah, yeah.
a useful thing to add. My brother would have loved to run over my shin with his power chair if he had
Sure.
one. So I kind of wanted to give the character a little more ability to show his agency in the novel, but still have him talk like my brother and share a lot of the traits that my brother had.
I would like to get your perspective on having a sibling that's disabled and what that did to your perception of the disabled community and how it changed the way you interact with disabled people at large now.
Yeah, I think like, I'm his twin, right? So like I never knew
Yeah.
like I was supposed to have another kind of brother. And And so I was like, "Oh, is he supposed to walk?" Like, it's like a thing I
Right, right.
discovered, and I really love my brother, and, like, he was kinda my safe space, and, like, he could say 12 words, but, like, there all kinds of communications he managed to do and be a vibrant person, and I think people who, imagine what our lives were like, a lot of times people would say to my mom, "I can't imagine what it would be like to have a child like yours,"
Yeah,
and so part of the novel was actually like, "Okay, let's try to imagine what that's like." And it's
sure.
not a tragedy, it's not sad, we're not sitting
Yeah.
around mourning that my brother's not normal.
Yeah, and I think that's what I got out of the book as well, which I really enjoyed, which is, being disabled is part of your life, but it isn't just your life. You can have your own adventures and have fun with your family and
Yeah.
friends. It's just part of who you are.
Yeah, and, I guess that he was very disabled, but he also led a full life. Like, I
Yeah.
think part of me, like, has a little bit of survivor's guilt, and part of me growing up is like, he also survived. Like, there's no I don't have to, like, make up for anything. He lived a really
Sure.
beautiful life and touched a lot of people and was charming within his limits, and I think, like, it's made me I really miss him. Like, I love seeing people like my brother walking around or rolling around
Yeah.
and out and about. Sometimes I really like almost start crying because I miss him so much.
Yeah, sure. Now, I apologize for not knowing this, but was he around to be able to read your book or enjoy the
No,
story or
he passed away almost 15 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but I was actually reading for a few guys that at a reading with a little lobbyists, advocacy group, and I was reading for some guys that are really reminding me of my twin brother.
Oh,
And I
cool.
always wonder, like, people ask, like, "What would your brother have thought of the book?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't speak for him." But then I was reading for these guys, and like they laughed at these
Sure.
3 parts. One was like a mention of Playboy magazine, and I was like, "Okay, my brother would have thought that was funny."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I would have loved to have read it to him or, to hear what he would thought. Hopefully he would give me a big "eh-eh," but,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
sure he would've,
he would
'cause
have.
it's a wonderful book, and, I wrote a memoir, Mighty, about my life as an independent disabled person. I'm very curious when you were, say, for instance, giving your brother a voice. Tell me a little bit about how you kinda came up with that.
Yeah, I think, like, part of it was, like, just thinking about all the ways he communicated. Like, that was actually the fun of the book is to map my brother's language onto this
Yeah,
character and, like, the way I'm always interpreting what he's saying and, like,
sure.
but also how I could get him wrong.
Yeah,
Trying to speak for somebody, you gotta be aware that, like, you could what's the difference between what you want them to say and what they are saying, and so I was
sure.
interested in writing into that problem, and so,
Yep,
like, there's the camp part where they're 18 and he's, kind of using metaphors to describe what his brother's thinking and kind of interpreting for him a little bit, but then when
yeah,
they're young, I was really interested. I was actually writing when they were, like, 5 years old, and suddenly Sal started speaking, and Michael could, like, in
yeah,
quotes, and Michael's hearing him, and, like, that was,
right.
like, a shock to me. I was like, "Oh my god, like, am I really gonna do this?" And so but I felt like that was, like, an emotional truth. Like, I felt I knew what he was thinking when I was little and then maybe started to question that or even get further
Yeah,
away from him in a way that maybe was less naive or just less close. And so I kinda wanted to map that, and so that's kind of the structure of the book was, he totally understands him when they're little, and then they get kind of more tension in what he's understanding until he
yeah,
doubts he can understand him at all. And so when the character escapes from camp, it's this sort of crisis of understanding that he's going to have to try to figure out in the rest of the books. Yeah, so like I wanted to kind of celebrate my how my brother communicated and that
yeah.
twin relationship that can feel so close, but also how you can project onto somebody something that maybe they don't want or aren't saying.
Yeah. It also resonated to me in the book when your lives separated, right? You're doing your own thing, he's gonna be doing his own thing.
Character, yeah, but yeah, we have to
I
do
think
that.
that's a huge thing because, yeah, I was born disabled. People are taking care of you, and that's one of the reasons when I wrote my book, I basically focused on the time that I was by myself. I didn't focus on all the caregiving and everything that happened up until that point. It's a huge thing when that, support structure is taken away, and it has an impact on the people that are the caregivers like yourself to your brother or my family, and a huge impact to the person that's then living the independent life.
I mean, it was
I
actually
thought it
pretty
was
similar.
beautiful.
It was pretty similar to what happened. Like, my brother got a
Yeah.
feeding tube, and my mom couldn't take care of him with the level of support she was getting from the
Yep.
state, and so the care crisis was very similar to what my family experienced, and
Sure.
We did have to, transition to a group home, and I wish I could have just like, stole him, like taken care of him
Right.
myself in some way. Like it
Kidnap
was
him.
kind of a fantasy in the novel. But I won't tell you what happens, but yeah, like my brother always would needs an intense level of care, no matter where he is, and so it's
Yeah.
very terrifying for a family to trust strangers
Anyone to
like
do that,
that.
right?
And I think we should make it easier for people to be taken care of at home with home care help. So
Absolutely. So, as you think about the book and people that are going to be listening to this and buying the book and reading it, what would you like them to take away from the story?
yeah, I think like that disability is not a tragedy. People with disabilities and people with intellectual disabilities can be funny and agents of humor. Their lives are as complex as anybody else's. I think like we either tend to think, people with intellectual disabilities, earlier they're tragedies or, infantilized, like,
Sure.
awe, like that reaction. And so
Yep.
I think I want my book to be a counterbalance to that and show how funny someone like my brother could be, and also like the way he made our lives more meaningful and joyful. But also like I wanted to show the work of caregiving, both like the
Yep.
dance of it, but also like that we do not make people's who are caregivers lives easy in America. And hopefully this
Yeah.
book opens their eyes a little bit, because the characters in my book, they're pretty privileged, and dad
Sure.
is in the medical system, the mom is a stay-at-home mom, but it's still freaking hard. And
Yeah.
we should make those people's lives easier, because everyone deserves dignity no matter what their disability.
I
So
couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Now, given you spend a lot of your time thinking about the disabled community and you have a great knowledge of the literature that's out there, what other things might you recommend to somebody that's interested in learning more about the disabled experience or the community?
yeah, I think there's great critical books written. Alison Kafer, Paul Longmore, Tobin Siebers, Gina B. Kim. There's lots of good stuff written about care and disability. Rachel Adams. But there's also great literature. So when I teach intro to disability studies,
Yep.
that's one of my favorite things. Molly McCulley Brown is a wonderful poet with cerebral palsy. Everybody's got to
Oh,
read
great.
her. Greg Marshall is a wonderful memoirist who's queer and has cerebral palsy, and he's hilarious. And
Nice.
so if you want to read a irreverent book about growing up with a CP and just laugh, and also like be moved to tears. He's wonderful. There. I also teach Magic Kingdom by Stanley Elkin, which is about a Make a Wish Foundation trip to Disney World that goes horribly
Okay.
wrong in a hilarious way. And this recent book called Hunchback, by Ichikawa, was about a person who's severely disabled, but she also writes porns. I like
Nice.
to open my students' eyes a little bit, but there's just such a wealth of disability, especially memoir. It's harder to find fiction as much, but I love a lot of literature, especially.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Um, all right, now I want to have a little bit of fun. First of all, what do you miss, if anything, about Ohio?
I miss like I miss the over friendly people. I miss like the
Yes.
superficial niceness. It kind of adds the quality of life, I feel like.
Isn't it funny having lived in New York and some very cynical places, LA for one? It seems when you are there that it's just normal. But once you go back, it's like, are these people for real? But they are. Like they will take you in and feed you dinner if you're stuck out in front of their house.
Yeah, I
It's
miss that. Like Oregon's fine, but it's not like Midwest nice
yeah,
is a real thing, and just like an openness to people that, I think
yeah,
on the coast there is less true. I also miss like the old buildings and the
yeah,
Victorian architecture. Oregon is a new kind of state,
yep,
and I do sometimes miss snow, but not as much.
yeah, particularly
Yeah.
not now.
You can't throw rain at people, so that's what I miss about snow.
That's right. Rainballs. And I close these episodes with a question that kind of usually brings out something interesting in the subject, which is if I were to clone you and there were two Brian Trapps sitting in front of me, what question would I ask to reveal who is the real Brian Trapp?
Probably was your catchphrase when you were in 4th grade.
Nice. And what would that be?
This is probably the most embarrassing thing. I can't believe I'm telling you this. But I was like a huge Full House fan, and I also
Yes.
just got this new puppy, and I love dogs. I still love dogs today. But I was like, this is my catchphrase, puppiness. I don't know why. I don't know why. What's wrong with me and why? And my friends were saying it too. I don't know why they went along with it.
That is
But
hilarious.
it's embarrassing, but also kind of I like it. I like
No,
that.
that's
I
great.
can't.
That's great. That's a great one. Well, listen, Brian, I appreciate you taking the time. I want everyone to get out there, get on Amazon,
Here's
and
the book.
buy Range of Motion. There it is. There's the cover. It's a great book. It's heartwarming, regardless of who you are, what your experience with disability is. It's a great book, and I appreciate you taking the time, Brian. It's a great story, and I'm glad we were able to meet and chat.
Well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I hope you'll click like and subscribe so you can meet the mighty.